Welcome, everybody, to the Bros of Gardening. My name is Mike Westphalia. I'm your host, and I'm joined always by my co-host, Daniel Van Dyke. How you doing, bud?
I'm good, buddy. We're into the thick of it now. We're officially in May, which is exciting. But you know how it goes. We're pretty cool, and everybody's kind of calm. And then all of a sudden, the warmer weather comes, and everybody's excited to get their landscape and their plantings done, which is a good thing. But we're doing our best to keep up right now. But we're having fun with it, and we're rolling right along.
It is a fun time of the year. How you doing, Alex? Alex is here, of course, always joining us, helping us kind of keep us in line during this podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. We're getting closer and closer to the summer months here. So
That's right.
Very excited. But what's really happening right now, it's May, so it's all about tomatoes.
That's right.
And we've got plenty in the garden center, plenty going on with tomatoes. But what can we tell people more about tomatoes? Kind of like maybe we can get into specifics today.
Well, certainly I feel like May 1st is kind of like go time for vegetables in general. And tomatoes are by far the number one vegetable out there that people want to plant. They're fairly easy. They don't require a whole lot of care. And everybody typically likes tomatoes. So it's a great one to start with. It's a great thing to try. May 1st, I think, is the best time frame because typically soil temperatures over, historical data that we have, is the soil temperatures at the right level. So you can always check your soil temperature. You can just Google it nowadays. You don't have to go out there, put a soil thermometer in it. Just look and see and find out what your soil temperature is. You typically want it above 50, which is typically what we're kind of experiencing once you get to May. It depends on the season, depends on how the spring's going. But now is veggie season, so we're kind of in it. And tomatoes are kind of the number one topic usually that people want to talk about.
Yeah. So, well, let's get into it. So, why are there so many different types of tomato varieties? And what are people actually choosing between when it comes to these tomatoes?
So, I think the first thing that comes to mind is there's so many different culinary uses for them. There's a lot of different shapes and sizes, and Mike can go into more detail than I can about that. But, I always see, some customers are requesting the cherry tomatoes versus the beefsteak tomatoes, those big ones. And I think if you're going to be slicing it up to use on sandwiches or you're going to be putting them on salads, whatever the case may be, I think at its most obvious answer is what you're going to use for them as far as edible, is what you're going to use them for when it comes to, eating them. So the other one I would think is, it seems now there are certain varieties that might be bred for specific uses, like, disease resistance and stuff like that. So I think a lot of times, depending on where you're located at, that might have something to do with it. And they keep recreating them and doing these slight alterations to try to fix certain issues. And so all of a sudden there are hundreds of varieties to choose from. And so those have been always kind of when customers are asking us and we're planting a garden for them or maybe getting them set up, that's usually, are you looking for the big, beefsteak type tomatoes, or are you looking more cherry tomatoes? Those seem to be kind of the differentiating factor for us on the landscape side of it.
Yeah, that's certainly it. It's just lots of different varieties for different uses, for different culinary purposes. And certainly, as he mentioned, there's a lot nowadays for different disease resistance and some of the insect repellents and kind of the different things that they can help with. But also space. Space has become a big thing. So, probably like the tumbling Tom was kind of the original one that I can remember back in the day that was in a hanging basket. It was a little bit of a dwarf kind of hung out of the hanging basket. Then we tried to do the upside down, the topsy-turvy tomatoes. But a lot of the newer varieties are like Sweet and Neat is a really good one. It's a cherry tomato that's a very compact form, so you can grow it in a container. So a lot of people that are limited with space can grow some different tomatoes. So, and I think it's really just choice. People want lots of choices.
Absolutely.
When it comes to tomatoes, somebody wants this certain one that thinks it's the best variety that they've ever had. Other people think that this one's the best.
That's always my favorite part. Is it's like they're so convinced that this is the best one by far. Yeah, and there's people who've grown them for years, grown different varieties, and they all have different.
Yep. And some people will fail with some. Some people will try something, and it's a lot of fun to try different varieties, and then have another option to say, "Hey, I tried that. I wasn't in love with it, so this year I'm going to try a different one." So it's just a lot of fun, and I think that's why they keep coming out with new ones and different varieties, and that's why there's so many choices. It just keeps the kind of interest going.
Yeah. So let's break down the big ones. If I'm choosing between a cherry tomato and a big slicer, what am I really deciding?
So depends. Typically, it's how much effort do you want to kind of put into it? I will say cherry tomatoes are one of the easiest ones to grow. They're very easy. They're very prolific, especially if you've got sun. Now, there are issues with all of this, and I'll talk about some of my tips and tricks as we kind of go through this. But your big slicing tomatoes, like Whopper is one of my favorites. Huge tomatoes means you need big plants. And you need strong plants, you need lots of fertility, you need to really manage it, you need to stake it, you need to do all of these different things. And you're not going to get a ton of them. I'm just being very honest with you. Whereas cherry tomatoes, they're extremely prolific. You're going to get tons of tomatoes with them. So that's kind of the thing that you need to think about is, one, how much space do I have? Am I going to plant, do I just want hamburger sliced tomatoes? Or do I want to grow a bunch of different varieties? Am I going to use it in salads? Am I going to, do different things with them? Am I going to cook with them? Once you determine kind of what your use is for, then you can say how much space do I have to grow as many as I can? Because if you're looking for just hamburger slices and you want to just grow Whopper, then you might need, 6, 7, 8 plants, depending on how much you want to actually get. Because each plant depends on the situation, depends on the soil, depends on your care level and all of that. I've seen people get 20, 30, 50 tomatoes off of a plant. I've seen people get, myself included, 10. Right. So then it's like, okay, so what do you really want to go after here? So that's, again, why there's more varieties too.
Yeah, so I know, like for us, when we're talking again, going back off of what we talk to about with customers when we're trying to talk through kind of what variety they might want. As you've probably heard me mention on this podcast a few times, is I'm always trying to find the easiest thing for a customer because I want them to, they're investing their time and energy and they're literally investing with us to install this garden for them. And so, I love planting the cherry tomatoes because, like Mike said, they're a prolific grower. They're a little bit, maybe some would argue, a little bit easier to grow. Yep. And they create such a big yield that you feel accomplished. Hey, my garden's doing well. It's thriving. Yep. Whereas the bigger tomatoes, because they've got to hold on to, again, it's more maintenance. You have to stake them up. They have, because it takes them a little bit longer to ripen, there's a little bit more opportunity for them to have issues throughout the time, or even just, our little friends in nature that we love to support so much. I've heard tons of stories from customers where they're like, it was just about ready, and then I came out the next day and they were all gone. Yep. And somebody, a critter had gotten into them or something like that. So what I like about the cherry tomatoes is because they are such a, they ripen quickly, they're a prolific grower. It's a little bit more bulletproof in a sense of just having that customer feeling accomplished and feeling like their garden's thriving, which is obviously what we want to do. But we've done a lot of both, and like Mike alluded to, tomatoes are by far the most popular one. When a lot of people don't even call it a veggie garden, they call it a tomato garden.
Right.
And, when we're prepping, they want tomatoes, and we'll even go as far to do some permanent stakes, in gardens because they know it's going to be the big beefsteak tomatoes or whatever the case may be, and so they just say, well, let's go ahead and actually that space is dedicated year round to tomatoes, even if they aren't using it for 6 months out of the year for that's what it's designed for. And so we've really done both, and we've had a lot of success with both. But that to me is probably the biggest difference between the cherry tomato and the big slicers, is just how prolific and how quick the cherry tomatoes seem to come on. And again, I like that aspect of it.
Much earlier, to harvest point, like you said, ripening earlier. And since he touched on it, that is one of my major tips. I kind of have like 4, maybe 5 major tips when growing tomatoes. And number one is almost always staking.
Yes.
You got to figure out a way to stake your tomatoes. And unfortunately, there really is not a, one solution for everybody.
Oh, really?
You think tomato cages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tomato cages typically are only 3, maybe 4 feet tall. Most tomatoes, if grown very well, can get 5, 6, 7, 8 feet tall. Not to say, so tomatoes are vines. Mm-hmm. So let's get that out of the way. They're vines. They kind of can ramble and go wherever they want. So you can run them on the ground or run them on a fence. But typically what happens is you run into disease and insect issues because then they just get bogged down. So you want to keep them upright, typically. You want to keep them vertical. Another small tip is good airflow, which is to eliminate some of the lower branches and leaves to create almost a tree form tomato, which allows good airflow underneath the tomato plant. That's another little small trick. But figuring out a staking system, I wish there was a one solution staking system that I could even sell you, but Daniel's built them into landscape designs. You can go out and build your own. We've used things from that wire mesh that they use in like concrete pouring, where it's like a very thick, and then that builds a big cage. Wow. But again, I mean, how big of a cage is it going to be? Where are you going to store it in the off season?
That's the big thing for me. Is it's just, it's great for that's definitely one of the issues that we have with it is it's great in season. You know, it has a purpose, but for the other 6 months out of the year, it's like, well, I either got to store this somewhere or having potential eyesore out in the yard. So
having some sort of like 4x4 frame, or even a 2x4 frame, or even a PVC frame, I've seen have worked pretty well. People grow them on strings. Sometimes just getting one good like 8 to 10 foot hardwood stake just right at the base of the plant. Do it early, because you don't want to damage the root system down the road, but do it early and then just keep it staked to that so you can constantly grow with the plant and kind of keep on tying it up as the plant gets taller. That is a huge benefit as you're growing some of these bigger tomatoes, and cherry tomatoes are one of the most, I think, aggressively vine growing plants. So something to think about there.
That is, because I've always just assumed,
don't let it scare you away from doing it either. No. I've done them in tomato cages. They're perfectly fine. Typically what happens is they grow out of the top of them, and then they bend over a little bit. They don't die. They just kind of look a little gangly and a little crazy.
Just something you're going to constantly
and then sometimes you just prune them back and you just let them grow again. And so there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of thoughts. One of my favorites is the all tomato cage. It comes with, I think it's 3 or 4 stakes. I want to say it's 3. And then it has arms, and you can get big ones, like 8-foot ones. And it comes with arms that you can kind of guide and move the arms up as the tomato gets bigger. So it can it's like a growing tomato cage. So that's a good one to kind of look into. I mean, then the issue is you got to get it deep enough in the ground. So an 8-foot stake turns into a 6-foot stake real quick once you hammer it down into the ground. So a little bit of thinking. Again, what do we always say? Plan it out.
Yes, plan it out. Now, so heirloom versus hybrid, what's the real difference?
So, I mean, I think as far as I can tell, it's kind of the pollination of like the classic ones are pollinated naturally, and then the hybrid ones are usually crossbred for a specific reason. It might be drought tolerant, disease resistant. But Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of those classic ones are more along the heirloom side.
So heirloom are handed down generationally. Typically in like a somewhat of a region or a state, but they've become popular over time because they're fairly prolific and they do very well. So like Cherokee Purple, Mr. Stripey, Mortgage Lifter, Brandywine, those are some of probably the most popular varieties out there. These are plants that will actually produce seeds that you can then grow the same plant from next year. A hybrid, you won't be able to. So a hybrid, if you grow a tomato and then plant the seeds from that tomato, you're not going to get a better boy, let's say, because it's a hybrid. It's a cross between two. So there's 2 varieties typically that they're crossing and creating a hybrid. This is not GMO, so don't worry about that. GMO is genetically modified. None of that is. Got it. Really, there are no GMO tomatoes out there. There's a new one that just came out, purple tomato. We won't get into all that. But all of your GMO-free tomatoes is basically everything that you see out there. It's the hybrids where they crossed 2 different varieties and to get the best attributes. So like, I don't know what Better Boy is a cross of. I haven't done that much kind of investigation, but let's say there's 2 different varieties that form the Better Boy tomato, right? Right. If you grow a seed from your Better Boy tomato, you're going to get one of those parent varieties, which I don't know what that's going to be. So typically a hybrid is cross-pollinated. Don't worry, you don't need cross-pollination to get tomatoes. They're self-pollinating, so you don't need to worry about that. So one plant will pollinate itself. Wind, bees, butterflies help all of that because each part of the flower or each flower has a male and female parts. But the pollen needs to go from one flower to the other. Yeah. So if you're not seeing a whole lot of insects, and you're not getting a lot of tomatoes, and your blooms are falling off and not forming tomatoes, then you might, just go shake your tomato, or you might take a Q-tip or a watercolor brush and just touch each flower. That'll help kind of move pollen from one flower to the next flower. So that's your plant this year. So that plant is going to produce better boys, if we're just talking about a better boy tomato. Right. But that seed will not produce a better boy tomato because it would have to be cross-pollinated with another one, and the story goes on. But the other option is heirloom. And heirloom is open air pollination is what they call it, where it's naturally pollinated from another one. Therefore, your seeds are actually going to be those heirloom seeds, and they're passed down generationally. Sorry, that's a tough word for me.
You're good.
But so don't need to really worry about it too much, I guess is really what I'm saying is pick the varieties that you like. Heirlooms are going to be a little bit different because they have attributes that people love, whether it's like an orange oxheart, which is a very orangey colored, they're going to be different tasting. Your hybrids are going to be grown, like Daniel said, for disease resistance, for prolific bearing of fruit, for, smaller shrub forms, lots and lots of different options there of why hybrids are produced, but both are very good options.
Nice. So, all right, Mike, let's pretend I know nothing about plants. Not that hard. But how would you explain the difference between detriment and indetriment?
So it's determinate.
Hard word for me.
Indeterminate.
That's all right.
So think about what the word is that you're saying. So determinate means it has a determined size or harvest time frame. Okay. Indeterminate means it's indeterminate. It keeps on growing. So determinate would be things that, so it's going to typically have a big bumper crop. Well, all of them kind of do, but determinate will stop producing at a certain point to a certain degree. You're going to get this big crop. So the best example would be like a Roma tomato. Yeah. Roma tomatoes are sauce tomatoes. So people grow them to produce sauces. Well, what do you need to produce a sauce? Lots of tomatoes. So you grow Roma plums or Roma tomatoes because they're determinate. You're going to get a big crop of tomatoes. And that's what you do is you go and harvest them and then you can produce a sauce. So you don't have to collect them over a season. But most people want indeterminate varieties because they want a tomato or 3 or 4 a week. You don't want a big, I don't want, 20 Whopper tomatoes or 400 cherry tomatoes in one fell swoop. I want to be able to get those. So indeterminate typically means bigger plants because they're indeterminate in size and indeterminate in harvest. Determinate means it's got a determined size and harvest time frame. And typically you're talking about saucing tomatoes, but there are those newer varieties, like I mentioned, that sweet and neat, husky red cherry, better bush, which is a better boy on a bushier plant. Typically you're going to see the stalk of these tomatoes are very, very thick. And always read your tag if you're not quite sure. It should say whether it's determinate or indeterminate. But some of your smaller dwarf varieties that are great for growing in containers and things like that are typically determinate. Doesn't mean that it's going to stop producing. You're just going to get a big crop and then it's going to slowly produce. Sometimes it might wane and actually just go away because the plant just did its job. It's designed to reproduce, right? It's trying to reproduce, form its seed, and then it gives up. It did its job. So sometimes you'll lose the plant. Sometimes it'll keep on producing. But that's why with determinate varieties, typically I'll recommend people to do succession planting. So like I mentioned, I think we were talking about that a couple weeks ago. Succession planting is where you plant some 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So you get that sauce tomato every 2 weeks. You get a bumper crop and you get that big crop that you can go and produce that. So it depends on, like we said at the beginning, what your plan is to use them for. Typically, most people want indeterminate varieties, but that's the big difference between the two.
Good to know. All right, so to wrap this episode up, if a customer came to both of you and asked what tomato variety they should purchase right now, what would you tell them?
I think for me, it would definitely be a cherry tomato. I mean, I said, if they are, a lot of times we talk about inexperienced gardeners and diving in to it and having fun with it. Again, like we talked about, I think when we were talking about herbs and things a couple weeks ago, this isn't the most expensive. You can have fun with it. You can play around with it. If you're not sure what kind of, tomato you want, try a couple different ones, see how they grow and see which one works for you. But for me, I'm all about having success because I feel like if they have success that first time, they're gonna be a lot more likely to keep doing it. And so for that reason, like we talked about when we talked about the cherry tomatoes versus, the big slicers, is I would go with the cherry tomatoes. You see the results a little bit quicker. You can start enjoying them a little bit faster, which again is going to encourage you. If you're doing all this work and it's kind of dragging along and you are having some issues with critters, I just feel like the likelihood of getting a decent crop and a decent yield is better with cherry tomatoes. But again, like Mike was saying, if your favorite thing in the world is to have a fresh sliced tomato for a burger or a sandwich, that might not be the route you want to go. But if you just had to pick one, if you were just getting into it, I would definitely start with the cherry tomato, just because I think you could have some early success with that, which will kind of motivate you to keep it going.
Yeah. So me, I can't pick one.
No, never.
So I'll try and pick one from each kind of group. The biggest one is, the big tomatoes, your big hamburger slice tomato. I like the Whopper. That's my favorite. It's not giant, but it's still a big tomato, 4 to 5 inches across. So a nice sized tomato. Yeah. And I have had the most success with it, producing the most amount of large tomatoes. Then I'll throw in, like, for heirloom, Cherokee Purple is my favorite. It seems to do the best, I think. It adds a little bit of color, and I think the taste is really, really different. It's almost got like a smoky flavor, which is kind of cool. Cherry tomatoes, I completely agree. If you're going to do one, at least do a cherry, because you're going to be successful. You're going to have fun with it. And I love Sun Gold. Sun Gold is like... used to be one of our number one selling tomatoes. It is like kind of almost a tropical flavor. It's amazing. It's kind of got an orange to yellow color to it. Super, super heavy producer. One of the best cherry tomatoes out there, I think. I always throw in a Better Boy. Just do a Better Boy. It's not my favorite tomato in the world. It's, mass produced. It's kind of more in line of what you're going to buy at the supermarket as like a salad tomato. But it's got thick flesh, which means it's more disease resistant. And you're going to get a good crop out of it, which is nice. Just, again, the success story, just throw in a Better Boy. If you've got a little bit more space, you could do a 4th of July or Early Girl. Those are both really good salad kind of tomatoes, maybe not hamburger size, but you're going to get a good sized tomato. And they produce early. Hence the name, 4th of July. You might get them by the 4th of July. An Early Girl is an earlier prolific producer. And then the last one I'd throw in there is newer to me, which is Defiant. And Defiant is extremely disease resistant. So if you deal with disease issues, wilt, fusarium wilt, and different types of tomato diseases, then that would be a really, really good one, is Defiant, because that one tends to hold up really, really well. So if you're dealing with disease issues, then put in the Defiant. And then I'll throw in there my last couple of tips, which is to help with disease issues, crop rotation. So crop rotation is very important. I mean, you don't have to do it all the time, but crop rotation is, if you planted tomatoes here this year, you should probably move and try them in a different spot next year, and then plant something different in that tomato location, like cucumbers or peppers. And that's kind of what crop rotation is. That's why they do it, is because certain plants use certain nutrients out of the soil and will zap the soil of those, or the disease that you might have gotten in tomatoes will be prevalent in that soil. So you need to move to another location, and it could be 10 feet away. So that's where we go back to that planning. Just do a little drawing of your little garden area. And just that way you can do the crop rotation. And then feeding is extremely important. So make sure you're feeding. These plants are producing fruits, and takes a lot of energy to do that. So make sure you're feeding. A tomato tone, garden tone is a great option, but some sort of all-purpose fertilizer, especially if it's got calcium in it, because calcium will stop the blossom end rot. And then the last one is, I love to mulch my vegetable garden. Not only does it make it look good, but it helps with moisture. It keeps your temperature regulated. Yeah. When we get really, really hot, it keeps the temperature cool, keeps your moisture in there. It makes it easier to water. You don't want to water with the sprinkler system over top of the garden. You want to water the root system. So Daniel knows this for a fact. You try and water a plant that just has soil around it, and it's impossible because the water's running all different directions. The mulch kind of keeps that moisture right there. It makes it a lot easier, and I think it makes it look pretty. And I think even if you use something like a cedar or something, it'll keep some of the insects away. But you can use any mulch. Now, all mulch will make your soil more acidic over time, so doing a pH test every once in a while will help with that. But I like those things: stake, feed, crop rotation, mulching. Those are like my 4 big tips when it comes to tomatoes. So it's not that hard, right? You just have to do a few things.
Just do a couple things.
And just, again, gardening is all about enjoying Mother Nature and getting out in the yard. So just go spend some time in your tomato patch and have some fun with it and try different varieties.
For sure.
And if you plant a lot, share with your neighbors.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring. All right, I think that's it. Anything else, guys?
I think I covered
that's it.
everything.
I said, just have fun with it. I mean, that's like we always, when customers always ask us, what should I plant, especially on the landscape side? I'm like, well, what do you inject? What do you, when you think of a tomato, where do you envision using that tomato? So have fun with it and try different varieties if you're not sure.
Has anybody ever used like tomatoes as just decorative?
Not that I have ever been a part of. No. That's, and like Mike was saying, so a lot of times they don't mulch those areas because it is more of a functional and they're growing with a purpose. It's not an aesthetic choice. And so a lot of times they don't think about mulching and doing those types of things. But like Mike said, it is still good because ultimately, when I'm thinking of gardens and landscape, I am thinking from an aesthetic standpoint.
Yep.
So even if it is a functional garden, making it look a little bit aesthetically more pleasing is never a bad thing either. And it obviously has some functional purpose as well, like Mike explained.
And Daniel's done a few of them that, it's hard to make them look really good, but we've talked about it before, putting in some obelisks, some, a windmill or, some sort of garden arts, whether it's statuary,
you'll
nice
appreciate
pathways.
that in the winter time as well, when you're not doing a ton of vegetables, especially taller ones like that, having some vertical elements in the garden. And then again, what you make if you do a raised garden, if you love to garden, doing it out of stone and stuff like that. I mean, you can get really fancy and creative with it. But again, if you're not sure that's what you want to do, you can do some, more inexpensive raised gardens or, container gardening, whatever the case may be, and just see if you like it before you go all in with the built-in raised gardens.
Right.
So.
Very organized, everything's spaced out and nice and neat and clean. Looks really good, even if it's a tomato plant.
Planning. All
right. Sounds good. Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube and listening anywhere you listen to your podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, all of those good things. Leave some comments if you've got any questions or anything you'd like to see in the future. And we'll see you next week.
For natives.
All right.
This is a good one.
That'll be a good topic.
Don't miss this one.
All right. We'll see you next week.